Dynasty Warriors Origins is one of the most boring, fun games I've ever played. If that's confusing, trust me, I'm just as confused as you. I grew up playing Dynasty Warriors, and I have to give a lot of credit to the series for blossoming my love of rock and metal music with its epic battle soundtracks. The larger-than-life characters were always great, and the large-scale battles usually kept me in awe. I truly love this series. I did skip Dynasty Warriors 9 though, having heard that it was a more open world game that wasn't very good. If you're like me and are returning to Dynasty Warriors because of Origins, you'll find that the game seemingly reboots the series with a return to form that focuses a lot more on story and battles and less on open world gameplay. If you're new, my review format is pretty simple. I'm going to break the game down into what I think is the good, the bad, and the in-between. Timestamps are down below if you want to see a particular section. Feel free to comment your approval or disapproval of my opinions down below.
You've come. That must mean my brothers have failed. My brothers fought to buy me time. But there's no escaping it. We must end things here. Guardian of Peace. I, General of Heaven Zhang Jiao, shall defeat you. The gods themselves will not stop me. I cannot be stopped. Together, we shall bring peace to the land.
Let's start with the good things about the game. These are the things that excited me and kept me playing despite some of the more boring aspects that I'll talk about later in the in-between section. I should mention that as of writing this review, I have 51 hours in the game, and I've completed the storylines for both Liu Bei and the Sun family, and I am currently in the middle of the Cao Cao campaign. Also, I'm going to mispronounce so many of these names. Dynasty Warriors is known for a few things, at least to me. Epic music, epic battles, and epic heroes. Origins has this in spades. Almost every character is larger than life with their own iconic character design, with a few exceptions. Personally, I'm a Guan Yu fan, so fighting by his side is nice to do again. And boy, is there a lot of fighting. Combat is awesome. If you're a fan of the series, you'll slip right back into the game like it's nothing. This is the same game that it's always been, with light and heavy attacks that can chain and combo for huge KO numbers. Origins brings back that old combat style from previous games, but with some tweaks. Parries are a huge part of the game now, with the ability to do a parry and counter attack that will leave enemy lieutenants and generals open for follow-up attacks. Evade now has a perfect evade where you can use iframes to dodge attacks and take no damage. There's a posture meter in the game called Fortitude that named enemies have. If you break this, they'll be left open to a big special critical attack. This will do lots of damage and push them back. Bravery is a special meter that the player has that lets them do weapon arts, which are special moves that each weapon can equip to do massive damage to enemies. These arts can range from a simple huge swing of your weapon to shooting ice out of the ground in front of you. Enemies can also be hard stunned when they are doing a special move by using certain weapon arts. Hitting these stuns is great for keeping combat pacing going, because if you're aggressive enough, you'll keep attacking through all of this. At the end of the day though, most battles against named characters boils down to a certain dance. Usually this dance is to hit with your weapon, then parry when they attack you, follow up with more weapon attacks, maybe hit a break that stuns the enemies out of their attack, break their fortitude, and then use your critical on them. Rinse and repeat. This happens for every named character that you fight, so if you don't like this sort of dance, you won't like fighting these characters, because it is repetitive, like most everything else in this game. Large-scale battles are here and larger than they've ever been before. Thankfully, you can clear out enemies by the thousands with your trusty Musou meter that is the same as it's always been, but with some added levels to it. Once your Musou meter reaches full, you can enter a rage mode that empowers you, and once it ends, you do a massive Musou attack. As the game goes on, you unlock the final form of Rage Mode, which will unlock the War God Rage. This will do an even larger attack in an area, exploding and taking out hundreds of enemies at once. In many battles, you can take in a fellow general who will follow you around. This general will also be able to do a dual Musou move with you if theirs is ready to use. This will be a bigger special move and has a cool animation. You also have troops that will follow you around, and you can even give them commands. Troops have their own skills that you can unlock unlock and equip, and they range in what they do. For instance, I have an arrow attack that shoots fire arrows onto enemies. Troop attacks also have what is essentially a critical success should you meet certain requirements. With the fire arrows, I will get a critical success if I am higher in elevation than the enemy I'm shooting at. Landing this critical attack will not only do damage and stun the enemy, it'll demoralize them as well. I should take a moment to mention that many of the issues I had in the demo have been mostly addressed. DLSS and FrameGen as well as XESS are here and are needed with this many people on screen at once. It used to only be FSR in the demo, and I had issues with frames on an Nvidia card while playing it. They also added in camera controls in the setup that will determine how often the game takes control of the camera away from you to show you important events. This allows you to keep playing even when minor events happen, and they have given options to turn it off completely, to have it on for only the most important events, or to have it on for every little thing. I don't believe this was an option in the demo, but I could be wrong. Either way, it's a great option. In the demo, I felt as if I was being pulled in every direction, trying to rescue every single person that called for help. This isn't nearly as bad in the actual game. There is a plan that is shown before every level at the war table. Most of the time, the game tells you to just wander around as you see fit to help. There are times when people need help and you can run to their aid, but I never hit a point where it was as dire as the demo. Oftentimes, I just followed the plan that was laid out at the war table, and it worked out well. I rarely lose a battle, but in the event that it happens, the battles have checkpoints so that you don't have to play the entire thing from the beginning unless you want to. This allows you to go back to certain key moments in the fight and start from there. Defeating enemies has never felt better, and the weapons run the gamut in terms of what you can use. There are spears, swords, lances, crescent blades, podows, wheels, gauntlets, staffs, twin pikes, and halberds, which are only unlocked after beating the game. Whichever weapon you want to main is completely up to you, but you will have to use all of them in order to level them up. Every time your weapon gains a level, your character will gain a level, so you must level everything up in order to not fall behind the recommended level of the battles. All weapons will gain some XP when you complete a battle, but the one that you are actively using will gain the most XP. Leveling your character also brings new skill trees as well. Skills are fairly simple. You earn skill points from playing fights and finishing challenges. For the most part, skills are passive and will only increase your base stats, but there are some that are more active skills for you to unlock. I spent the majority of the game using the twin pikes or the sword because they had the ability to shred enemy fortitude without the enemy being able to really do much about it. The twin pikes will let you air juggle enemies and prevent them from attacking, and the sword has some cool moves that destroy fortitude. After beating the game for the first time, I unlocked the halberd, which is shaping up to be a top tier weapon as well. However, a few weapons were missing that did appear in the game. The hammer and the fan are weapons that enemies have but are unobtainable to the player. Stats are super important to combat. Each weapon has up to 4 weapon art slots that can be mixed and matched as you gain more arts. There are also passive stats that are built into each weapon when you find it or buy it. These stats cannot be changed unless you equip a different weapon with different stats. Once you beat the game, a transmog style system unlocks where you can transfer the passive stats of one weapon to another identical weapon. You can also merge weapons of the same kind to increase their power. There are only a handful of items that you can equip to your character, but which ones you equip are important to your build. If you're good at the game, you might put everything into damage with little into defense, but if you're not so good, maybe put more into defense or whatever. There are also consumables you can equip to raise health, among a number of other things. Where I think the stats are most important is when you are facing a boss of some type. Every named enemy is a type of boss of varying power, and almost all named enemies fight exactly the same except for 2, Zhang Jiao and Lu Bu. These 2 fights are what I would call spectacle fights because these are more along the lines of a Souls style fight. They are specialized 1v1 fights where they have their own special moves, arena, and you have to figure out the fight. Zhang Jiao has an incredible looking arena where he summons boulders and tornadoes and all sorts of magic to fight you, whereas Lu Bu is in an open stone yard and is just using his raw strength to fight you. Both fights have their own little quirks, but if you played the demo, Lu Bu's moveset is the exact same, but the way to beat him is different. I'll leave that up to you to find out, but regardless, I enjoyed both of these fights and thought that they were well done. The main game revolves around your character choosing which army he is going to join. There are 5 chapters in the game, and the first 2 revolve around the world sort of setting things up, while chapter 3 brings in the idea that you will need to choose a lord to follow. Once you make your choice, that's it. You have to see it through to the end of chapter 5. This leads to replayability because you'll get different stories and battles from different perspectives. These choices can also make a shift in who lives and dies in certain story battles. Some characters are meant to die but can be saved if you intervene. This will split the stories for a specific leader in 2, giving you one basic ending and also a true ending. Thankfully, after you complete the game the first time, you can go to any inn and start the game again from any time in the story to make a new decision. For instance, I chose to side with Liu Bei the first time through. I beat the game and afterwards went to an inn where I could then start the game at chapter 3 and choose a different lord to follow, and then play the rest of the game out again without starting over from the beginning. It's basically a new game plus. But with mechanics out of the way, let's talk about graphics, because graphics are a mixed bag. I'll go more into detail on this in the in-between, but what I'll say here is that the graphics for the characters themselves look pretty good. Each character is very pretty, and I get Asian MMO vibes from them, but that's all I'll say now for the graphics. The music is just as good as it always has been, with soaring guitar solos, rock songs, and heavy instruments that come in while you're fighting hordes of enemies. The music in Dynasty Warriors has always been a standout, and I find myself humming some of the menu music throughout my day. Well done. Endgame content is actually fairly vast, and I wasn't expecting it. As I said, the story branches into 3 different leaders, and you must choose one of them. Once you've completed that leader's story, the credits roll, and then you go into New Game Plus. Post-game content allows you to choose battles and restart them from a specific point, and replay any battle you've done before. This allows you to complete the other leaders' stories without having to go through all of Act 1 and 2 again. The max level for your weapons is increased, letting you unlock newer movesets and raise your overall character level even higher. A new difficulty mode is unlocked called Ultimate Warrior Mode. This unlocks a harder game mode and new challenges that appear to help you unlock new and better rewards, from weapons to troops to different horses and other things. You can also select Lu Bu as a companion to help you in battles. Lastly, it unlocks the halberd as a usable weapon. There are a lot of things that I like about this game, and almost all of it comes down to the combat itself, but there are a few things about Origins that aren't so good. Let's talk about Despite having a whole suite of upscaling and graphics options, Origins suffers from a few things that I would consider to be truly bad. The first thing is the performance. For me, the game runs smoothly except for one thing: hitching. The demo had this issue as well, and the main game does too. As I play the game, it starts to hitch after maybe 40 minutes. I think there may have been a memory leak or something along those lines, because it got worse the longer I played, sometimes freezing for a whole second or 2 at a time at its worst. Updates have helped alleviate this issue for the most part, but even now, I'm still having hitching issues after an hour or so instead of 40 minutes. This makes boss fights almost impossible in some scenarios, as parrying or dodging is timing based, and I can't do that effectively if the screen is frozen. The other huge issue is the autosave feature. I don't mind having an autosave feature in the game, but this is the most aggressive saving system I've ever seen. It will save the game even when I've done nothing. If I go into a town to see if there are any items or mail for me and then immediately back out, it'll save. If I've opened the map, it'll save. If I close the map, it'll save. If I equip a new weapon, it'll save. Now, why is this bad? Because you literally cannot play the game while it's saving. You can't interact with anything. Most times, you can't even move. This can last for a second or 2, and while it's not that long, I've probably had at least a half hour of my playtime being stuck in the autosave at this point. It's annoying and it's frustrating. These 2 things I would classify as being absolutely the worst part of the game, and that's why they're in this section. The stuff that I don't think was nearly as bad is in the next section called The things listed here in the in-between section are all things that I think are either just okay, or they may have bad things about them, but don't really affect the overall gameplay enough to put them in the bad section. The stuff listed here is way more subjective, in my opinion. I said at the beginning that Origins was the most boring and exciting game I've ever played. Everything in the good section was exciting. The combat was exciting, the battles were grand, and there is a lot going for the game. The story, however, is a whole other thing. I have 51 hours in this game. I've played through all of Liu Bei's story and all of the Sun campaign. I just started helping out Cao Cao. Of those 50 hours, almost 30 hours have been in combat. Where are the other 20 hours being spent? In dialogue, mostly. There is an overworld map with some exploration, time spent in stores, and I had a little AFK time where I had to take my dog out or use the bathroom myself. So even if I take that into account, let's say that's about 5 hours. This puts me at around 15 hours where I'm spent in dialogue. This dialogue can come in the form of cutscenes with characters about planning battles, or simply with characters that want to talk to me, and almost all of it is mundane. I don't mind a good story, heck, RPGs are some of my favorite games, but holy crap, this is boring. There is a bonding system in this game that lets you talk to different heroes and increase your bond with them. This gives you things like special coins or items. Sometimes you'll get special challenges that will give you skill points for completing them. These characters will almost always have some sort of dialogue scene that you will need to sit through in order to upgrade their bond. The dialogue can be skipped through by pressing a button to move it forward, and that's fine, but I didn't really do that all that much for this review. The worst part is that the dialogue is mostly inane, useless prattle. Sometimes it's related to an upcoming battle, but mostly it's people talking to you like you're the most interesting and important person in the world. The people in this game are absolutely in love with your character, some of them even venturing into a more sexy realm. I thought that maybe I was reading too far into it in some cases, but then I saw this scene.
The dawn takes on an exceptional quality in your presence. I'll admit it. You possess a strength that rivals my own. So, too, do I admit that you've shaken my faith in the absolute nature of strength. You have cause to rejoice, for I recognize your existence. My skill in battle still exceeds your own, but all of your strength has brought us on even footing. I, who cared for naught but myself, found myself desiring you. Now that battle looms on the horizon, I will await the day you become mine, for now. But once I have claimed all under heaven, I swear I shall have you as well. As if I would let you go. Chasing down my target is my specialty, after all. Still, I am astonished to have found something I value more than strength. So, too, am I forced to consider the merit of your beliefs, given the impact of your deeds. That being said, I have no intention of changing. I simply mean to have you, who showed me this different possibility, for my own. If you possess some ability superior to strength, I will simply become stronger, and keep that ability under my control by force. After all, they say the greatest joys are to be saved for last. No one but you has ever provoked such passion in me, and no one else ever shall. I'll have you take responsibility for that. With you around, life will never get boring, even after I've claimed this world. You'd better make it through all of this alive, for you are the only one who can offer me such amusement. If you were to die for some mundane reason, I'll drag you out of the grave myself.
Like, how am I supposed to take this? Knowing Lu Bu, the answer is probably rough. But that's every single character in the game. They all want to talk to you, to basically tell you how awesome you are and how much you mean to them. And it's almost always useless information. This type of dialogue even extends into the main story itself. It's all very after school special in the style that it's written, coming off with that, hey guys, if we just stand together, we can do anything. that sort of style. And personally, I don't think it's acted all that well.
Oh, would you mind keeping my coming here a secret from the others? If you would agree to staying silent, I will share a favorite of mine in return. You mean you won't report my actions? Okay, that's good. I've been rather indulgent recently, so I'd planned to stay away today. But I've changed my mind. This chance meeting is not one I can let go. So how about it? Shall we head out now? I might be able to find a new kind of fun with you. Quite the formal one, are you? Well then, let's head out on our first round together. There are too many people here. Let us go elsewhere. I'll go on ahead. If you wish to try a new experience, then follow me.
This could be chalked up to the direction of the voice acting as opposed to the acting itself, but it's still not good. I don't have high expectations for voice acting or story in these games, but even then, I wasn't expecting this. And I wouldn't have an issue with cutscenes or dialogue scenes in a Dynasty Warriors game if they weren't almost half of the game itself. It feels like there are two very different teams working on this game because the dialogue in the actual battles isn't all that bad. It's just in these cutscenes where it really falters. The story itself meanders as well. Origins is just that. It's the origins of the three kingdoms, and the ending of the game ends with the formation of the three kingdoms. We don't get to bring one of the kingdoms to full success. We get to the point where they form, and then the game ends. This is meant to be rife with military drama, but my goodness, it takes forever to get to that point. And in my opinion, it kind of overstays its welcome. I like the Romance of the Three Kingdoms story that Dynasty Warriors tells. Usually. The story is fine, it's the way that it's told this time around that isn't. Another thing about the story is that we are playing as a nobody character. Your character might as well be nameless up to a certain point when they give you a name. They also have their own story that unfolds as you progress. Don't get me wrong, you do get to name your character in the beginning, but it's not like it matters. Your story isn't all that much more interesting, and the way that you're treated narratively is weird. It's like you only exist when the story wants you to exist, despite being the most important character throughout the entire story. For instance, I am the most powerful character in the game, downright magical. I defeated Lu Bu by myself, and I'm rewarded with a cutscene that doesn't even have me in it. I made a pact with Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei, and it's like they forget that I'm part of their brotherhood at times. The existence of Ziluan, the game's name for your character, I didn't name my character that, breaks the entire world. I could walk into any enemy stronghold, any enemy base, and kill any enemy leader as if they were a twig, but I'm not allowed. I can shoot ice out of my hands, and I can't go after Cao Cao by myself. You are held back because they have to have a story. I defended a castle with Guan Yu and killed every single officer that attacked by myself, but we still lost the battle because the story says so. So why do I even exist? Dialogue options rarely make any difference to the story, with most options being different ways to say the same thing. My character has no dialogue voice acting, despite him talking in the actual battles. Why is there no voice acting for my character when there's no character creator? If this is a preset character, shouldn't he have a voice? I'm playing the same character that everyone else is playing. You don't get to really play any of the named heroes either. I said it earlier, but you do have generals that are named heroes that you can equip as followers that come into the battle and follow you around. They have a War God Rage meter that builds up as well, and the game will allow you to switch to play as them for a short time. However, your time is limited, and their movesets are pretty much the same for every other weapon that you pick up. So if I were to switch to Sun Shangjiang, her wheel attacks aren't that much different than any other wheel attack that, say, my own character would do. These characters do have their own weapon arts and Musou attacks, but it's pretty much the same as every other weapon attack. It's nothing special and used as more of a giant Musou attack to clear out large areas more than anything. While I get that I'm playing as Ziluan throughout the game, not being able to fully play as the named heroes like in the past games with them having their own unique movesets and whatnot is kind of sad. Because all of the characters use the same weapons as pretty much everyone else, this means that certain iconic characters have been changed to fit the style of the game. Most notably, Zhang He no longer has his iconic claws and his flamboyant style that he is so well known for in the past. Now he's just a dude with a spear who doesn't really dress all that different from the other generals. A few characters have gotten this treatment, and I think part of it comes down to the developers not wanting to create a whole new moveset for these more unique weapons. I also think this is the reason why you can't equip fans and hammers. I mentioned earlier that there were 2 spectacle boss battles in their own arenas. These fights were excellent, and I was really hoping to see more of these in particular. These are the only 2 fights that are like this. The other boss battles are usually attached to some large-scale battle that involves thousands of enemies. The problem is that in many cases, I've already fought most of these characters a handful of times before. The game kept throwing Xiao Hu Dun at me over and over, acting like he was gonna defeat me, even though I've fought and beaten him easily like 5 times or so beforehand. When I got to the end of Liu Bei's campaign, they acted like Cao Cao was the biggest bad guy ever, but I easily beat him, like the 4 times I'd beaten him before. Once again, this plays into the idea that your character means both everything and nothing in this world. It just ignores the fact that I've handily trounced these characters many times before because the story is more important and not your character. What's interesting about these large-scale battles and this emphasis on dueling against enemy generals is that when you get into a large battle, every fight is a gank fight. This is a pretty contentious issue in the Souls-like community because I think most people in those games hate gank fights, especially in Elden Ring, because the game is more centered around 1v1 fights and fighting 2 bosses at once sucks. In Origins, you might have 5 named enemies around you at any point in time in a large-scale battle. This means that you may end up getting air juggled around a battlefield for a little bit. Luckily, you won't die in one hit in most cases, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Earlier, I talked about the graphics and said that I would bring them up again. Like I said, the characters, they look pretty good, and the weapons are nice too. These 2 things I think have the highest fidelity to them. However, the rest of the world looks pretty terrible in comparison. Background textures for tents or trees or wood look like they're straight out of a PS3 game. They can look muddy in places, and when you're stuck listening and watching people talk for 14 hours, the ugly backgrounds make the nice characters stand out in a very obvious way. I mentioned in my video about the demo that the camera had some issues with getting stuck on walls and that sort of thing. I can say that the camera is much better and doesn't really do that anymore. It does sometimes get stuck on the ground if you're fighting someone on a hill, but that's about the only time that I noticed it. There is a moment in the Sun campaign where you can fight an optional boss for the true ending of the game, and the fight is in a cave. This is where the camera really messes up because it doesn't go through the walls. It pushes into your character, making it impossible to see anything when there are 200 enemies and 8 bosses crowding into you. Luckily, this was a one-off situation. And lastly, I want to mention a lack of any multiplayer or co-op modes. Previous games had these, and while it doesn't really make a difference to me, it should be mentioned for those who did play these modes in the past. Whew, okay. This has shaped up to be one of my longest reviews on the channel. I love these games, so I'm going to be hypercritical in comparison to other games, but just remember it all comes from a place of love. While I have been bored to absolute tears at times while playing this, I've also had an absolute blast when the game actually lets me play it. I hope that when we finally get to dive into the actual War of the Three Kingdoms, we get to see it unfold through action and not through talking heads. Thank you so much for watching my review. I know I've been doing more discussion content, and it's been nice to return to doing this. Hopefully I'll get to do more reviews in the future, and if you want to know when those videos come out, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you know when that happens. Thank you all so much. I'll see you soon.